just returned from a couple of weeks in the U.S. And I have to say, what a fascinating time to be in America. Why? Well, because on the one hand, the country is being run by the worst political class since at least the Civil War, and possibly the Revolution. Yet, on the other, Americans, individually, are getting it done, and amazingly, still not getting demoralized. Take New York City. The Big Apple is not just a major metropolis in Joe Biden's America, but it also has the misfortune, self-inflicted, it must be said, of being run by a hard left progressive Democrat, Eric Adams. So, on the one hand, the place is regressing, and with the exception of the fact that Times Square is now a tourist mecca rather than a sleaze den, New York is feeling very much like it did during the bad old days of Robert De Niro's Taxi Driver. Are you talking to me? Indeed. It seems that not a day goes by in New York that there isn't some hellacious crime captured on video, such as a motor scooter riding gunman shooting random people on the street in Queens, or a guy stabbing his Lyft driver and then trying to escape by jumping off an elevated highway. Yet, so many of the New Yorkers, the Americans, the ordinary people I met while I was over there, were working every single day to rise above this. People I met like a Bangladeshi migrant who went to America when he was 6 months old and 33 years later sold his software company for millions. And a woman who worked for a rental car agency who, with her husband, managed to work their way out of the projects and into a home of their own in the suburbs. That hustle, that drive, that energy is what actually makes America great, in spite of the best or worst efforts of those who claim to be leading the place. Which, of course, brings us to Joe Biden, who is, of course, the last person you think about when you hear the words hustle, drive, or energy. Just look at him here as a bemused King Charles has to move him on like a dopey tourist gawking at a beef-eater guard. Now, a little later in the show, we're going to take a deep dive into just how unpopular Biden has become, and the likelihood that he will, as I have said multiple times, decide ultimately not to run again. Now, of course, to do that, he would have to solve the Kamala Harris problem. But there is an elegant solution to this, of course. All he has to do is make a speech announcing that he is not running again in 2024, and that, in the interest of democracy, he will not endorse any candidate, and instead allow the primary process to land on the best choice. But who would that be? Well, right now, many people are saying that could be Gavin Newsom, the governor of the incredibly dysfunctional state of California. A number of insiders have pointed to a story in Politico about Gavin Newsom's power networks, which was released this week, as a suggestion that party elders are, behind the scenes, looking to bring him in should the going get too tough for Biden. And tough it is getting. We can see that even reliable media allies are starting to turn against the president. I mean, wouldn't you if you had the job of trying to drag this guy across the line one more time, even though he barely gives you the time of day? The Atlantic, as reliably left as journal as they come, just put out a major story headlined, "Step aside, Joe Biden." Of course, easier said than done when every step threatens to turn into a stumble. New York Times columnist Maureen Dowd, meanwhile, broke the embargo on talking about Navy Joan, Hunter Biden's unacknowledged child, who the president refuses to talk about or even admit, sadly, exists. Despite claiming to put family first and famously tweeting, quote, "I've had a rule my entire life. No matter what's happening, no matter how important the meeting, I'll always answer a call from my grandchildren," unquote. How touching and how hypocritical. And then there was this. Axios, again, hardly a right-wing outlet, branded Biden Old Yeller in a report about just how obscene and awful he is to his aides. According to the Axios report, behind closed doors, Biden has such a quick-trigger temper that some advisors try to avoid meeting him alone. Some take a colleague along almost as a shield against a solo blast, the report said. The president's admonitions include, "God damn it, how the blank don't you know this? Don't blanking blank me and get the blank out of here," according to current and former Biden aides who have witnessed and been on the receiving end of such outbursts. This is nothing new, of course. I took a dig in the archives. He's been yelling at voters, not just aides, since at least 1987.
One real quick question. What law school did you attend, and where did you place in that class? And the other question is, could you quickly, I think
I probably have a much higher IQ than you do, I suspect.
And back in 1974, 50 years ago, Biden offered up this little tidbit that your English teacher might have called foreshadowing.
Mr. Biden, it's nice to have you here. As the youngest member of the Senate, the one, therefore, who may expect the longest career there, I wonder if you'd say to us, since it's clear that you're not corrupt and you got elected, why should people think that the system produces corrupt results when there you are?
Well, I'm not sure you should assume I'm not corrupt, but thank you for that, though. The system does produce corruption, and I think implicit in the system is corruption.
Of course, for those who've cared to pay attention, Biden's temper has always been there. Just one leg of the trifecta of anger, untruthfulness, and utter stupidity that has characterized his decades in the Senate before his all but accidental rise to the Oval Office. 4 more years? No wonder even many Democrats are now quietly saying, no thanks.